Hello, Wez, and welcome to the Dandelion podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing?
Yeah, really well. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. And can we just get you to do a little intro, a bit about yourself? So where you're from, what you do, a bit of background, maybe your hobbies?
Yeah, of course. So, I'm Wez from South London. I work in marketing. I've kind of always worked in the marketing space, started off in media, and kind of now working more in retail. My hobbies, kind of love going for like very wholesome kind of hobbies these days. So reading, walking, just seeing friends. To be honest, this summer, a lot of my hobbies have been, kind of taken away just because I've been so busy with weddings. So I think my main hobby is going to weddings this summer. Had 10 weddings and 4 stags this year.
You are fantastic at going to weddings.
So yeah, weddings that's my special skill.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you are great. My brother even invited you to his wedding, so you're clearly like top expert wedding attendee.
He did. I also went to your sister's wedding, so there's like
I've
been to all of your family's weddings. It's quite bizarre.
You're not invited to mine.
It's awkward.
So I was trying to work out how long we've known each other. I think, did we say last time it was about 14 years?
I think it is 15 years.
Oh,
I think it's 15 years.
That makes me feel really old and strange.
It makes me feel really ancient. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Cheers. Thanks, Sally. It's been a long old time.
Yeah, so me and Wez, we first met at university in halls. You were one of the first people I met, I think. And yeah, we hit it off straight away to the point where I think we annoyed everyone. Did someone say that they thought we were friends before? I think one of our housemates did, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I guess they're friends. Like they've known each other before." And we were like, "No, we literally met each other this week." So
yeah, we did just instantly click. But I think that definitely did annoy just everyone else.
Yeah. We've been doing inside jokes to annoy people for 15 years.
And to annoy each other for 15 years. So and to annoy each other.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to just dive into the questions. Obviously, this podcast is about connection, like broadly speaking. What does connection and disconnection mean to you?
I think connection is, I suppose, just being like in touch with other people, in touch with your surroundings, in touch with kind of current affairs, what's going on around you. I think it's just that kind of almost like maybe like a sense of belonging to your environment, or to people around you, like a oneness either with people or things. And yeah, I suppose disconnection is the absence of that. So yeah, maybe feeling quite kind of like isolated on like a personal level, or feeling not having that sense of belonging to your environment, and feeling like you're a bit of an island.
And so then on that, do you think we're becoming more or less connected as a society?
I think that's a really interesting question, because I think that can be split into two things. On the one hand, if you look at very surface level, we are far more connected because of technology. We have social media. We have so many ways that we can connect with other people. You can connect to people who live on the other side of the world. You can speak to them instantaneously through instant messaging or email. You can pick up the phone. And I think that there are so many conduits to communicate and connect with people now. We are definitely, on a surface level and on a technology level, far more connected than we have ever been in history. At a kind of like more personal level, when you actually look at it in maybe a bit more granular way, I think that we probably are less connected, even though those kind of formal routes to connection exist. I kind of do feel like as a society, people are far more isolated now. I feel like lots of societies used to be more community-led, community-driven, maybe more family-driven. But now I think it's very easy for someone to feel very othered or very isolated. And so yeah, I don't think it would surprise me to know that, or understand that lots of people probably feel our generation might feel less connected than previous generations, even though like I said, those kind of routes to communication are here in a way they weren't here before.
Yeah. And have you found yourself feeling disconnected like that?
I don't think I've necessarily felt a sense of disconnection, or I don't know. It's an interesting one, because during COVID, I think that I, for example, stepped away from people and stepped away from things. Like I think a lot of people did. I think initially kind of everyone was doing like a million Zoom calls and doing all of these things, but I think that I used that time to withdraw a little bit. But that was quite purposeful and quite intentional. And I think that was quite important for me. So I think it's just, we're kind of attributing like a positive sentiment to connection and a negative sentiment to disconnection. But sometimes you kind of want to be disconnected from media, from people, from communication. And I've always lived a really busy life in London. It's always been really hectic. And so actually being forced to take some time and be not in London, being at my parents' house in Surrey, and I didn't come into London for 13, 14 months, which is the longest time I've ever been away from town. And it was actually really good for me. And I was very disconnected, but I think that kind of allowed me to recharge, and kind of, take pause. And so, I think sometimes, disconnection might be a positive thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because no one else has really said about disconnection being a positive thing. But I think you're right. Depending on what kind of context you're talking about it in, I guess, if you're feeling disconnected with yourself, or you're feeling disconnected with those around you that you want to be connected to, that's obviously a negative thing. But if you're choosing to disconnect, that's in itself can be a very healthy, powerful thing. So I know that we've obviously known each other for 15 years, and clearly we've actually managed to maintain a friendship. But normally I do find connecting with people quite tricky, and I think that this is for a variety of reasons, right? But like I think, I read into things a lot. I overthink. I pick up on like kind of micro expressions, and like always basically, as you know, always think that people hate me. Just a fun way to live. Well, I'm guessing because you work in marketing, you know about like how to connect with people generally. And I know that you're very personable anyway. But do you personally feel like you struggle to connect with others on like a really authentic level?
So I think certainly on like a surface level, I find it quite easy to connect with people. Like particularly within my job, kind of working in like marketing, like type of marketing I do, partnerships. A lot of my job is dealing with other people, and I constantly have to liaise with people and form instant connections with them to achieve whatever the brief is. So I think I can find it very easy to connect with people on like a surface level, but it's just like how, to your point, how deep or authentic are those connections? I think it's very easy to find some immediate common ground with someone, but actually getting a authentic, deep, meaningful connection, I think that can sometimes be trickier for me, because I think that the foundation of a meaningful connection is about honesty, and it's about authenticity. It's probably also about a bit of vulnerability, being able to be truly honest with someone about how you're feeling, what's in your mind. And I suppose that's what forges a proper connection. And I know that I definitely do find it hard to be vulnerable with lots of people and to be authentic and honest all the time. So I can definitely like walk into a pub and like start talking to someone, and we'll have like a chat for whatever amount of time. But do they leave actually knowing anything truthful about me, or anything that would mean that it was like a meaningful connection? Maybe not. I do find that hard.
And I wonder, so we're going to move on to basically talking more about the main subject of this interview, which is masculinity. And that kind of made me wonder whether that fear of vulnerability has any kind of link with the masculine, like with being a man. Do you think that maybe there's a part of what men are expected to be like, and that's maybe what holds you back, or what holds men back in general?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. I think that through generations, society has built up a construct of what men should be or what a male should be. And there are so many different layers to that. But if you kind of go back a few generations, it was kind of like a provider, the bedrock of the family, a protector. All of these are kind of very kind of strong ideals. And we kind of disconnect kind of strength with vulnerability. We kind of see them as being like an antithesis of each other, of themselves. And so it's just like, oh, to be vulnerable, for example, is a weakness, and therefore it's not like a masculine trait. So yeah, I can certainly understand how people who feel like they need to live up to that construct of masculinity would definitely double down on their features or their personality traits that are strong, and would shy away from something which might make them look vulnerable or weak.
Yeah, and there's this sort of stereotype where women talk about our feelings, we are very, in touch with our emotions, and men aren't. This is the stereotype. How true do you think that is?
I think historically that probably was very true, and I think it is still true to a degree now, but I think that we are better at having these conversations. Like, I think there is a national or international discourse about this now, and people are seeing it as a real issue. And so I think that there are lots of guys who are far more comfortable being open and being honest with those around them about how they're feeling. But I think there's definitely still a way to go. But I think it just comes down to the people around you. I think that if we have an assumption that there are certain people who are more empathetic than others, let's say that we were to have an assumption that women generally were more empathetic than men, that creates an environment and a forum for women to talk to women. Whereas if men are not seen as empathetic, then they're not fostering an environment for their male friends to talk to them. So I think that that's also a bit of a barrier. It's like, I may feel like I'm now in a position to open up to someone, but if I'm not then in an environment to do so, then that makes it doubly tricky. So you kind of need both. You need to be willing and open to start having a conversation, but you also need to be in an environment that nurtures that.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that has been a change from my perspective as a woman, like just being able to speak to my male friends. I mean, with me and you, it was different because I feel like we just were very close straight away, and I felt like I could trust you. So I just, you saw me through all of my little meltdowns, and I feel like I've always been able to open up to you. And then there's other male friends that I have that, or my brother, for example, where like over time, I feel like we can have those kind of conversations and we can be much more open, which is really nice, actually. But when I think about it, I think about my female friends and I think about my male friends, this is on a really, really basic level here. How many female friends have I seen cry and be that level of vulnerable versus how many male friends have I seen cry and be that level of vulnerable? Well, it's like the difference is crazy.
Yeah.
So yes, I feel like I can talk to my male friends and my female friends to an extent, the same level, but how open can they be? You know, that's the sort of the tricky bit. And I wonder whether there's still room to change and grow.
Absolutely. I think that we're at the beginning of this, like, new kind of shift. It's like a massive cultural shift that we're going through, and this is quite literally the genesis of it. Like, it's only just beginning, and I think it's only really very recently that people have started to have these conversations and kind of talk about guys being more open and being more vulnerable and being more honest. So I think it will take a lot of time for that shift to take place. I think that the emotions experienced by girls and guys might be very, very similar, but in those examples that you've said, the women are far more comfortable showing their emotion. It's not that their emotions are necessarily more raw or more powerful, more potent, but they feel more comfortable illustrating them. Whereas, with guys, you might even be able to talk about it to someone, but you just won't necessarily feel like that comfortability in being able to like express it in like having a good old snot cry, because that's just gonna be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because society just doesn't like dictate that you can do a Viola Davis snot cry. So yeah, like I think it'll take some time.
Yeah, because there's so much talk about, you know, and fair play to charities and different organisations that have tried to push the agenda of like, men, you need to speak to your male friends about your problems, etc. And I obviously that's a really good thing, but I wondered as a man, you are the spokesperson for all men today.
Correct.
Do you feel like that's having an impact, like those kind of policies and campaigns?
I think so. I suppose people on the grassroots of this will be able to really kind of analyze how much of an impact it's having. But I think the fact that conversations are taking place means that there is some level of progress. Could it be better? Probably. But I think it is having a bit of an impact. Just seeing all of the kind of marketing and messaging and almost branding and PR around this subject, I think is really important. The stats that kind of say that suicide is such a huge killer of men, and a disproportionate amount of men commit suicide. And yeah, I think just like messaging around, if you are feeling a certain way, like speak to people. I think that is like legitimizing that kind of urge that people are having, that they might want to speak to someone. I think that maybe 3 decades ago, you might have had like an urge, like I'm feeling really bad, I want to speak to people, but you didn't feel legitimized in that thought. But now it's kind of saying, you're okay to do that. Like it's completely sanctioned for you to seek help, for you to speak to your buddies, and also just facing into it. Like it's only in the last few years that I found out those really staggering and terrifying statistics about men and suicide. I just didn't know that before, and I would like to think that there are people who are going through struggles who, because of stats like that, realise that they're not the only ones. I think because there's this uniformity in masculinity and how you're meant to be presenting, it's really hard to understand what's going on under the surface. So I think it must be very easy, or would have been very easy for guys to assume everyone else is fine, it's just me, everyone else is coping. But understanding these stats, I think that people realise, okay, it's not just me. There are clearly countless other people going through these struggles, and that's okay. We just need to create a forum where we can talk about it and then address it and heal from it.
Yeah. The stat that I read about suicides, and I don't know if this is on a global scale, but this is probably a similar one to the one you're speaking about. So 77% of suicides are men, which is just horrifying, absolutely horrifying. So I guess, do you think that this is to do with a lack of connection, or maybe a feeling of loneliness, like you said, with, you know, feeling like no one else understands and no one else would get this, or you don't have anyone to turn to? Or do you think there's bigger factors at play?
I think there are always going to be other factors. I mean, people will go through a variety of different like situations in their life that might lead them to feeling so low. That could be a variety of things. Connection might be one of those things, or disconnection might be one of those things. But I think that rather than looking at connection solely as like the reason why someone might be feeling a certain way, connection might be the thing, might be the lifeboat. So it's not necessarily the reason why you're feeling so bad is because you've got disconnection. But if you had good connections, then that could be the lifeboat that saves you, because you might be feeling bad about something completely different. But then if you've got a really good authentic connection, you can be vulnerable with someone else. Then just having that open conversation could be what saves you. So I think it's both. I think there probably are other factors, but yeah, I think that loads of people probably are very lonely and probably don't feel like there is anyone that they can kind of talk to, and that in itself might be causing the issues. Or it might be the disconnection that means they can't talk about those issues.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, you know, obviously suicides are usually as a result of someone suffering with depression or other mental health issues. And as someone that has had depression, I feel, you know, that it's a very tricky illness, because it will make you believe that you don't have those connections, or you don't have anyone you can turn to. And I think that's when, you know, having these big campaigns and having people say it's okay to talk, and like just was it like Lab Bible that's like, you're right, mate, or something like that, just something to make it a little bit more normalized, and like, this is the situation, you're in crisis, you turn to a friend, and it being very much like, this is the step you take. I think that's really, really important, because when you're in that state, you can't see the logic, and that you have got people around you. So yeah, I do think it is really important. So we can't talk about masculinity without talking about toxic masculinity. Do you think it's like an overused kind of buzzword, or do you think it is something that exists?
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah, I mean, of course, like lots of people have toxic traits, and just by nature, like some traits which are very masculine will also be toxic. And I think that
like what do you think? Let's get into it.
Yeah, I think that anything that is hyper aggressive, that is a thinly veiled attempt at hiding an insecurity, or becoming super aggressive because someone says something that might damage like a perception or an image of you. I can't think of too many examples without looking in the mirror. But yeah, no, I think that of course it exists. People can be really toxic, and I'm saying this as someone who has like most of my mates are guys. I went to an all boys school, so I know all about masculinity, and I know it can be toxic, and I'm sure that I have demonstrated traits of toxic masculinity myself, having grown up in a very masculine environment. And I think that's okay. What's important is, as you get older, challenging the things you've done and being better. Like everyone like does things wrong at some point.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just about people recognizing it and thinking, okay, I should probably be better, and educating yourself and being better. I think that the issue is that people hear a phrase like toxic masculinity and they take it really personally, and then they just deny it and lash out, which in itself is toxic masculinity. And the cycle just repeats. Do I think it's overused? Yes, I think it probably is. I think that people will throw out phrases like that, and often it doesn't help. One of kind of my main bugbears with stuff like this is that when you kind of start a dialogue, are you looking to inform someone about something and change their perception, or are you looking to condemn someone? If you just want to condemn someone, then yeah, just throw out you're toxic, you're this, you're that. That's not really going to get through to them. I think that toxic masculinity is a very kind of cute little phrase which does encapsulate something, but often we need to go a bit deeper. And I think to get through to someone, rather than just throwing out a buzz phrase, actually kind of go into the nitty gritty of what they're doing, why they're doing it, the effect it has on other people of them doing it. And I think that's probably going to get through to people more than just saying, oh, you're toxic, you're a toxic male, because people do get defensive when they hear stuff like that.
You can't talk about toxic masculinity without talking about the I want to say the leader or the man that sits on the throne of toxic masculinity at the moment.
There are so many thrones. And yeah, he sits on one of them. He sits on one of them, but there are so many thrones.
So many. So the guy that currently has sort of temporary status at the top of the toxic masculinity I don't know, pyramid.
Let's go pyramid.
Andrew Tate. I just wanted to take a moment to sort of give my view on it, I guess, because like you say, I think with someone like Andrew Tate, I think you have to really ask yourself what they're trying to achieve and why they're doing what they're doing. Because I don't think that we can, like you say, just throw the word toxic masculinity at someone and step back and expect them to go away and that's that. I think we have to delve a little bit deeper, and I think with Andrew Tate as an example, he's just, my theory is basically someone that feels disenfranchised for whatever reason, whether that be a childhood thing or various different complex issues that they have. They don't have the attention that they need. They then go through life seeing other people rise to the top or get the public recognition. They then think, okay, cool, I will also be controversial, say the controversial things so that I can get that attention and validation that I want. And with people like Andrew Tate, it is usually misogynistic comments. Maybe they weren't loved enough by their mums, for example. Maybe they got rejected too many times by women. Whatever it might be, I think, it's very complicated, but I think it is essentially an attention-seeking strategy that works because we've seen it work. He's just one of many people that will rise to the point where they've got enough following of people that also feel disenfranchised and now feel validated by what they're saying until they probably say something a bit too controversial for their following, and then they kind of fade away again into the sort of more niche underground, potentially much more dangerous realm. Or he just really hates women and he just really wants everyone to know about it. That's the other alternative.
Could be that.
But I do think it is more complicated, and it's just the same as Piers Morgan. It's just the same as Trump. I hate to even talk about them, give them more airtime. But, it is just a case of they need that validation. They're going to say the controversial stuff. because that is the best and easiest and quickest way to get it? Do you think that do you think there's any other factors at play there, or?
Yeah, I mean, it might just be really simple. He might just be an opportunist. And saying, I think to your point, saying stuff that's controversial is really popular, because there are loads of disenfranchised people who are not kind of towing the line of this wave of social liberalism which the world is going through. And yeah, they're not liberals. They're not progressive. And someone is speaking about the things which they believe. Whoever it is that's speaking might not believe it themselves. They're an opportunist. They realise that by speaking about this issue, by beating this drum, they are going to get popularity. They are going to get fame and fortune. So yeah, all of your points might be correct, but it might just be a case of he was kind of smart enough to understand society and know there was a bit of a gap in the market for saying these kind of things. But I also feel like we're slightly spoiled in the West, and certainly millennials who live in certain areas, into thinking that this kind of stuff is really controversial. If Andrew Tate had said this in the 50s, he's just another guy. Like, he's not saying anything new. He's literally saying, like, women belong in the kitchen. Yeah. And that's just, like, literally, like, 1950s 101.
Yeah.
Like, it is only in, like, the last generation or two generations that what he has said has become unpopular because of the rise of feminism, because of progressive thought. So all he's doing is regurgitating something from his father's era or grandfather's era. He's not actually reinventing the wheel. Obviously, within the lens of 2022, what he's saying is really toxic and really hurtful, but it's actually very old philosophy, which has only very recently become unpopular. And I think we need to remember that. It doesn't legitimize what he's saying, but I think we need to probably put down the shock of just like, what's he doing? Like, this is insane. It's like, well, it's not insane. It's actually still quite recent, and in lots of parts of the world, it's still very present. I think it's very easy for us, kind of, as millennials who live in progressive societies, in progressive cities, who have had educate, like, as women who have had like education and can have careers. I think it's very easy to forget that not very long ago this was normal. And we also need to just recognise that as well.
Yeah. So what you're saying is he's beige.
He's hella beige. he's hella beige.
Yeah, I like that. And it's made me realise that this podcast isn't actually going to go anywhere because I don't say anything controversial on it. So I'm going to kind of need you to say some quick sound bites, really quick. Okay. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm trying to think as well. Where do we go with this? Like, what? How bad do I want this podcast to work? That is the question.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. It is really crazy. Going back to a more sort of general topic on masculinity, do you think that gender roles still exist? Like, obviously we've got a much more fluid and like open gender spectrum now, and like, you know, do you think that kind of 1950s gender role of past times, does that still exist?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it absolutely exists. Obviously, we as a society are becoming more progressive, and we are moving away from that. But yeah, these roles definitely do exist. I think that there are probably less of them, and they're probably less overt or less potent. But yeah, of course. And I think they, within reason, always will to an extent, just because there are some things that that only a certain sex can do. At the moment, apart from Arnold Schwarzenegger in the film Junior, other than that, men can't carry babies, for example. So there will always be kind of like gender roles around around pregnancy and then childbirth and then like immediate kind of weaning. Like that will always be the domain of women or of people with female reproductive organs. So I think that, yeah, like within reason, we will always have gender roles. But yeah, certainly right now in 2020, 2022, they still exist. And again, it's that trap of being in London, New York, Sydney, where we're so progressive, and we kind of forget that in other parts of our country, people are still living very traditional lives. Growing up where I grew up, it was very common for a lot of the mums to have fantastic professional jobs. Common for my mates' mums to earn more than their dads. So I certainly grew up in a kind of like progressive bubble. And it was kind of only when I got a bit older and went to university that I met people whose mums were homemakers. And that was an alien concept to me because, yeah, like my friends' mums would be like accountants, lawyers, bankers, and I just didn't necessarily realize until I was 18, 19 that, yeah, there are still loads of families in the UK where dad goes to work and mum's at home, and that's still very prevalent in lots of places. And I'm not saying that is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But I think we always just need to realize that lots of different places globally, are just very different, and some of them are still very traditional.
And I also think that the problem that a lot of women and couples face, particularly, well, I can only speak from a UK perspective and from what I've heard because I'm not a mum, but like the price of childcare is extortionate in our country compared to other countries. So you've kind of, a lot of women feel that, you know, it makes more sense financially for them to be staying at home if, for example, their partner earns more than them, rather than paying for that childcare and having to balance that. I mean, that needs to be looked at, preferably before I have kids, please, UK government, because it's like, it's crazy expensive. Like my friends are always like, you know, it's basically like paying an extra mortgage to like just ensure that your child is alive.
I know, it's insane, and and so I fully understand there are still pressures for to keep women in those gender roles, those financial pressures when it comes to stuff like childcare. And also what perpetuates it. So to your point, the woman, the mum choosing to stay at home because her like husband or partner earns more than her. And often the reason for that is going to be the gender pay gap, right? Or it's going to be, it's just like a societal like evolution that means that men are more likely maybe to go for certain jobs that pay more. And so, from the get-go, kind of women are being kind of forced to fail, if that makes sense, in terms of it's harder to escape those gender roles because you're less likely to earn as much as the guy. So therefore, when it comes to the crunch, you're the one who would have to stay at home, and often that kind of that ceiling. I'm not sure if it's like the glass ceiling or whatever it is. That starts at such a young age. So it was really interesting. So the school I went to, we had a sister school, and so I went to an all boys school. We had all of the girls in our sister school, and both of these schools achieved very strongly academically, pretty much on a par. And we know that generally girls perform better than guys in exams, but yeah. So, but with like these schools, the girls and the guys pretty much on a par, which is really interesting. All these years later, looking at what everyone does, and just looking at all of these kind of like my mates from my school and the mates from the other and the girls from the other school. If a guy from my school went into the medical profession, they're all doctors and they're all dentists. Whereas of the girls, lots of them kind of are like pharmacists, like physio, paramedics, fewer doctors, dentists. Same education, same like aptitude for like academia, but there was something that meant that the guys applied to be doctors and dentists, and there was something that meant that fewer of the girls did. And just looking at all of the careers across both the schools, a lot of the guys went into banking, wealth management, consulting, and a lot of the girls didn't, and they will, and I know that on average they'll be earning less. And there is just something within the basic framework of our society, which just means that even if you do go to a certain school, get a great education, there's just something that means that there are certain careers which still guys are more likely to go for, probably because they feel like they need to. And there are still going to be girls who don't go for those jobs. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I find it very interesting too. And I think that the education system, you know, your upbringing, all kinds of things play a huge part in that. I've obviously been a massive feminist since I first heard Alanis Morissette, I think it was. So
Thank you, Alanis.
Thank you, Alanis, followed by Destiny's Child. I mean, Destiny's Child was like, we can't even get into this right now.
That's a different podcast.
We can't. My love.
That's a different show.
Yeah. We will go off topic so quick. But yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I'm just thinking about my experience of like when I grew up. Obviously, I went to a state school. It was an all right school, and it was a mixed school. I definitely felt like people didn't expect me to do anything, really. I mean, I don't know what that was about, because that could have been about all kinds of different things. But I remember when I applied, so we went to Southampton Uni, and everyone assumed that I was going to, I'm not going to say, there was another university that perhaps didn't have as much of a good reputation, quote unquote, and everyone assumed I was going to that one. And I don't know what that was about, and that's kind of followed me along my whole life. So when I finished my degree and then I went on to do my master's, everyone was quite shocked about that. And I don't know whether that's just the people that I have had around me, or maybe that I come across quite stupid or ditzy.
Didn't want to say anything, but
yeah, you're like, you are so fucking stupid. But yeah, I've definitely felt as a woman that it was like I've always felt that level of shock whenever I achieve something, which I don't think that if I'd been a man, I would have had that level. It would have been kind of more assumed, which has always been quite interesting. What do you think that we can do on a society level, or like on an individual level, to make people feel, and particularly men, since the subject of the podcast, feel more connected?
It's really hard, because there's only so much you can do at like a big kind of policy level, because it just comes down to, because connection is so personal. So it's really hard to connect those two things. The issue that we've got is so endemic, and it's so steeped in our society that it probably will take some time. But I think that what we're doing now is really good in terms of these big kind of charity or government initiatives to talk really loudly about these things. Hopefully that message will permeate through, and it might not be our generation who reaps the benefits of it. It might be generations to come. But I think, yeah, just like not letting the conversation die in terms of what's important, breaking down those kind of gender norms, which I think is happening, and just kind of letting people know that it's kind of like okay to kind of have these all authentic, like vulnerable conversations, which I think leads to like authentic connections. But I think it's also us having to teach ourselves how to have healthy habits. And I'm not entirely sure how we do that, but a lot of us have really unhealthy digital habits. For example, going back to what we were saying right at the beginning of the podcast, the kind of avenues to communicate are all there, social media, but we know that lots of people use social media in a really damaging, unhealthy way, which can probably lead to a lack of connection. So I think it's just retraining ourselves. How do we use these tools in a healthy way? And I don't have the silver bullet, but I think there are a few things.
Yeah, I agree. But I also think that social media is amazing, because I have to say that. So I will not hear anything else said about it. Okay, Wes? No, I'm joking. No, I completely agree. I think it's, like we've spoken about this previously, about kind of curating your own, what you feel is giving you the right things from your social media. So don't just follow someone because they're famous, or don't just follow loads of fitness accounts because you think it's going to inspire you, because if you start realizing that certain accounts are making you feel a bit crap, then you can very easily just curate your own feed, which makes you feel better. And that's kind of like a good way to think about it. So to finish off, what piece of advice would you give our listeners on how to feel more connected? And this can be to anything. So it could be to yourself, it could be to other people, it could be to spirituality, nature, whatever you like.
So if you want to feel more connected to people, then sometimes you have to kind of start dialogues, like text your mates, like start talking. What's the worst that can happen? Sometimes you kind of just need to be proactive and kind of start these dialogues. If the friends you currently have aren't necessarily going to be the ones for that, then find some new ones, join a club, see a therapist. I think that we need to be really proactive. But yeah, it's a good point about kind of feeling connected to nature. We know that there is a strong correlation or link between kind of like nature and mental health, and get outside. And I know that not everyone will live in areas where they have loads of access to nature. We're really spoiled in London as being a really green city, but I think it's just really important where we can just to like get outside, like feel connected to nature, to your surroundings, and just be proactive, do things you've not done before, put yourself out of your comfort zone, and just try new things. I think it's very easy to get stuck in a rut and think that things will change without you doing anything to change. For your situation to change, you sometimes have to be really proactive and take a bit of a leap of faith, because not everyone has a fairy godmother who can kind of turn a pumpkin into a carriage and send you on your way. Sometimes you have to be proactive and do that yourself.
That would be useful though, wouldn't it?
It would be so useful.
It'd be handy.
It'd be great.
Because Uber's not great nowadays.
It's really bad nowadays.
It's so bad.
It's painful, shocking.
And also, yes, for the record, we love a man who goes to therapy. So, yes, therapy, 100%. We also love a woman that goes to therapy. We love anyone that goes to therapy because therapy's great and we should all do it. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. And yeah, this has been really insightful and really interesting. So yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Great to chat.